In the bosom of New York's Hudson Valley, cradled among thick forests and meandering brooks, lay a secluded glen known as Sleepy Hollow. The townsfolk whispered that a strange enchantment hung in the air, stretching from the mossy bridge to the quiet graveyard beyond the church. Time seemed to slow in Sleepy Hollow, and the mists that clung to the valley floor were not entirely of this world. Among the villagers and farmers, ghost stories passed from lip to lip like sacred folklore. The most fearsome of these legends concerned a figure said to haunt the woods after nightfall: the Headless Horseman. They claimed he was the ghost of a Hessian soldier from the Revolutionary War, decapitated by a cannonball and doomed to ride forever in search of his head. It was into this eerie landscape that a lanky, superstitious schoolteacher named Ichabod Crane arrived. He hailed from Connecticut, and his ungainly frame, long limbs, and crane-like neck made him an amusing figure to the townspeople. Yet Ichabod was a learned man, teaching the children of Sleepy Hollow to read, write, and cipher, all the while earning room and board from the parents of his pupils. Ichabod had a deep love for ghost stories and never missed an opportunity to attend evening gatherings where tales were spun beside the hearth. He particularly loved listening to the tales of old Brouwer, a Dutch farmer who claimed to have once ridden with the Headless Horseman and lived to tell the tale. These stories thrilled Ichabod and chilled him in equal measure. The shadows that danced across the walls at night seemed to take on forms of their own in his imagination. But Ichabod was not only a scholar. He had a keen eye for opportunity. It wasn't long before his gaze settled upon Katrina van Tassel, the only daughter of a wealthy Dutch farmer, Baltus van Tassel. Katrina was known for her beauty, with cheeks like ripe peaches and a sly smile that could unravel a man's senses. Many a suitor sought her hand. But Ichabod saw more than beauty. He saw the promise of land, livestock, and a comfortable future. Katrina knew her power and enjoyed the attention of her many admirers. Chief among them was Brom van Brunt, a burly, spirited fellow better known as Brom Bones. He was the antithesis of Ichabod, muscular, fearless, and possessed of a rough charm that drew the admiration of many. Brom had long set his sights on Katrina, and he did not take kindly to Ichabod's presence. Still, Ichabod was cunning. He used his wit, his genteel manners, and his skill at music to endear himself to Katrina and her father. He often stayed late at the Van Tassel farmhouse, serenading Katrina with his fiddle, entertaining the family with tales from far-off places, and hinting at his dreams of one day owning a fine estate. But Brom was no fool. When his attempts to scare off Ichabod with threats and pranks failed, he devised a new plan to play upon the schoolteacher's fear of the supernatural. And what better weapon? Autumn fell heavy over the valley. The forests flamed with red and orange, and the crisp wind carried the scent of cider and drying leaves. It was during this season that Baltus van Tassel announced a harvest party at his estate, a celebration that promised good food, dancing, and the company of the entire valley. Ichabod prepared for the evening with great care. He borrowed the best horse available from the local farmer with whom he was boarding, a plough horse by the name of Gunpowder. The beast was old, gaunt, and had one eye milky with age, but Ichabod paid it no mind. He brushed his black coat and slicked back his unruly hair, convinced that tonight he might win Katrina's favor once and for all. As Ichabod rode through the woods toward the Van Tassel estate, the shadows lengthened, leaves rustled in the trees above, and unseen creatures skidded across the forest floor. The tales of ghosts, witches, and goblins crept into his thoughts unbidden, but he shook them off. Tonight was not for fear, it was for fortune. The party was in full swing when Ichabod arrived. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a golden glow over the dancers. Tables overflowed with pies, roasted meats, and spiced cider. Ichabod bowed low to Katrina and joined her in a lively reel, much to the chagrin of Brom Bones, who brooded at the edge of the room. As the evening wore on, the older guests gathered by the hearth to share ghost stories. Brom, never one to miss a performance, launched into a tale about a rider who tried to cross the bridge near the church. but had been seized by the Headless Horseman and vanished in a burst of flame. Laughter followed, but Ichabod could not ignore the chill that had settled over him. When the music slowed and the guests began to drift home, Ichabod lingered behind, seeking a private moment with Katrina. Whatever passed between them is a mystery. But when he mounted Gunpowder for the ride home, his face was drawn and solemn. Whether he had declared his intentions or been gently rebuffed, no one could say. The moon had risen high as Ichabod entered the woods. All was silent save for the creak of leather and the clop of Gunpowder's hooves. Then, a sudden rustling from the thickets made Ichabod's heart lurch. He spurred the horse forward, but the shadows pressed close. A cold wind swept through the trees, carrying whispers in a tongue he couldn't understand. He reached the infamous bridge at the edge of the old churchyard. It was said that the horseman's power ended at the bridge, no ghost could cross it. Ichabod leaned low, urging Gunpowder on. Then, from the darkness behind, came the thunder of hooves. The thundering hooves behind Ichabod grew louder, matching the frantic beat of his heart. He dared not look back, for fear of what he might see. Gunpowder, sensing his rider's panic, surged forward, its bony frame pushed to the limit. Branches clawed at Ichabod's coat as the woods closed in around him. Then he heard it, a dreadful snort, like the breath of some infernal beast. Against his better judgment, Ichabod stole a glance over his shoulder. There, outlined in the moonlight, was a towering black steed, its rider cloaked in shadow. The most terrifying detail, the rider had no head upon his shoulders. Instead, he held it aloft in one gloved hand, as if ready to hurl it. Ichabod let out a strangled cry and kicked Gunpowder into a desperate gallop. The horse responded, but the old nag was no match for the spectral steed that followed. Trees blurred past, and every moment was a battle not to tumble from the saddle. He remembered the legend, the horseman's power ended at the bridge. If he could only reach it, he might survive this night. With renewed desperation, he veered toward the winding path that led to the churchyard. The rickety wooden bridge appeared through the fog, illuminated by moonlight like a path to salvation. Ichabod didn't slow. Gunpowder leapt over the final rise and clattered onto the planks of the bridge. Behind him, the phantom rider rose in his stirrups. With terrifying force, the Headless Horseman hurled his head toward Ichabod. There was a blinding flash, a burst of fire, wind and darkness, and then nothing. Chapter 4, The Vanishing. The next morning, the sun rose quietly over Sleepy Hollow, casting soft light through golden leaves and morning mist. Farmers began their work, children wandered toward the schoolhouse. But Ichabod Crane was nowhere to be found. Gunpowder was discovered grazing near his master's boarding house, saddle askew and reins trailing. A group of villagers, concerned by Ichabod's absence, followed the road to the church bridge. There, among the trodden leaves and broken twigs, they found Ichabod's tricorn hat. Beside it lay a shattered pumpkin. No body was ever recovered. Speculation ran wild. Some whispered that Ichabod had been spirited away by the Headless Horseman. Others believed he had fled in fear and humiliation after losing Katrina's favor. Baltus Van Tassel offered no answers, and Katrina herself remained tight-lipped about what had passed between them that night. Brumbones, however, seemed to grow more jovial in the days that followed. He married Katrina not long after, and when the tale of Ichabod's encounter was told at gatherings, Brum always smiled a little too knowingly when the pumpkin was mentioned. As for the school, a new teacher eventually arrived to take Ichabod's place. But the story of the hapless schoolmaster who vanished one autumn night became legend in its own right, retold again and again by the fireside. Weeks passed in Sleepy Hollow, yet the mystery of Ichabod Crane lingered like fog over the valley. Children dared each other to visit the bridge after dark, and the townsfolk spun endless variations of the tale. Some insisted Ichabod had been taken by the horseman. Others said he'd run off to the city, embarrassed by a broken heart. But no matter the theory, one truth remained: the valley felt changed. Stranger still, Katrina Van Tassel no longer carried the sparkle she once did. Though married to Brumbones and living in comfort, her laughter seemed more forced. Her eyes, once full of mirth, now glanced nervously toward the woods when the wind blew too strong. One crisp October evening, a traveler named Elias Thatcher arrived in town. He was a young historian from Albany, drawn by tales of haunted glens and ghostly riders. He stayed at the village inn and spent his days speaking with locals, gathering notes for a book on American folklore. The name Ichabod Crane appeared frequently in their stories. Elias was intrigued not only by the legend but by its emotional hold on the town. Even the most skeptical farmers lowered their voices when discussing the Headless Horseman. Several elders insisted that each autumn, near the anniversary of Crane's disappearance, the woods stirred unnaturally, as if the spirit reawakened. One evening, Elias ventured to the Van Tassel estate to speak with Baltus. The old man greeted him warmly but grew serious when the subject of Ichabod arose. "Best leave that business alone," Baltus muttered, eyes fixed on the hearth. "Some stories are born to warn, not to be picked apart." Later, Elias encountered Katrina in the orchard, where the apples had begun to fall. She seemed startled by his presence but agreed to speak. "Ichabod was kind," she said softly, eyes drifting toward the trees. "Too kind, perhaps. He believed in ghosts. I think that was his downfall." She offered no further explanation. That night, Elias penned in his journal, "Something dwells in Sleepy Hollow, not merely legend, but a presence. Whether ghost, guilt, or illusion, I intend to see it for myself." Chapter 6: The Return to the Bridge. As All Hallows Eve approached, Elias prepared for his experiment. He would return to the church bridge at midnight, on the very path Ichabod had taken, in the hopes of seeing, if not encountering, something that might prove the legend true or false. He told no one of his plan. Armed with a lantern, a journal, and a pistol, for comfort more than defense, he left the village after nightfall. The path was eerily silent, save for the rustle of dry leaves and the occasional hoot of an owl. As he passed the tree said to be the Major Andre tree, where the ghost was believed to appear, the air grew colder. A prickling sensation crawled up his spine. Still, Elias pressed on. The bridge loomed ahead, shadowy and still. The moonlight spilled across its old timbers, and the distant church stood like a silent sentinel beyond. Elias paused, holding his breath. Nothing moved. He stepped onto the bridge. A sudden gust of wind extinguished his lantern. The silence deepened, unnatural and thick. Elias's heart raced. He reached for his flint to relight the lamp when he heard it, the unmistakable sound of hooves in the leaves. Slow at first, then faster. He turned. Emerging from the mist was a black figure atop a monstrous steed. Its cloak billowed behind it, and its hand, its terrible, empty hand, reached towards something round and dark held at its side. Elias froze, paralyzed by fear. The rider leaned forward, but just before it reached him, a second sound cut through the night, a bell tolling from the church tower. Distant but clear. The horseman halted. For a moment, all was still. Then the figure reared back, hoarse screaming into the night, and vanished into the mist. Elias collapsed to his knees, trembling. When he lit the lantern again, he was alone. The bridge was empty, the woods silent once more. Chapter 7: The Truth Beneath the Tale. Elias returned to town at dawn, pale and shaken. Though he tried to tell the villagers of what he had seen, many scoffed, claiming the horseman was only a story, perhaps he'd drunk too much cider. Yet something had shifted. Katrina sought him out that afternoon. Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed her urgency. "You saw him, didn't you?" she asked. Elias nodded. "Then listen carefully. The horseman is not merely a spirit. He is a memory of vengeance. He feeds on fear and regret. That's why he comes in autumn when the veil is thinnest. Elias frowned. Do you believe he killed Ichabod? She hesitated. No. Not exactly. But I believe Brum led him into those woods that night. Knowing the legend would do the rest. Fear did what muscle couldn't. And the pumpkin? Elias asked. Brum's doing, I'm sure. To make it theatrical. But something else came to that bridge. Something real. She placed a hand on his arm. Don't chase him again. Some truths are better left buried. That night, Elias packed his things. He would leave Sleepy Hollow with more questions than answers. But also with the knowledge that the legend was not just a tale to entertain. It was a warning. As he departed, a storm rolled in, scattering leaves across the road. Behind him, the valley faded into shadow. But above the wind, far in the distance, came the faint echo of hooves.